Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome to another discussion video. With this discussion video, I have been doing a trend lately, and I have never really counted it, but out of all the discussion videos I have done in the past, I may have done a lot more on Final Fantasy 15 alone, both before its release as well as after its release. And needless to say, I have been... It's kind of tough to kind of word it, but I've been kind of like a selfish prick in a form of sense when it comes to Final Fantasy 15. And in another word, I've been greedy about it too, because it's like, playing Final Fantasy 15, I felt like it was missing something. It was missing something that defined itself in the Final Fantasy franchise. That demand factor that everyone liked it in that one game. Whether it's like a particular mechanic that you enjoyed, whether it's a form of battle system that you liked, a job system, the way they level up, the way that you can attain magic abilities and stuff like that. Numbers of ways. With Final Fantasy 15, it didn't really do anything in terms of mechanic-wise intrigue, except for like the battle mechanic in terms of the warp speed. The battle system in the game has been the best part so far within Final Fantasy 15. Everything else, though, not so much. And it feels empty. And it's a point that I've been trying to figure out for the longest time is like, what is it with me in Final Fantasy 15? I don't hate it, and it's not like it deserves so much praise or anything like that. It's just, I feel like it's been incomplete, and I want it to finally be complete. I want it to be Final Fantasy 15, the way it was meant to be, the way that people wanted it to be hyped up, you know? Record, yes, is not going to be the best Final Fantasy game of the franchise. It's going to be impossible to pull something like that off. For some people, it's going to be Final Fantasy VII. For others, it's Final Fantasy VI. And for very few, there are either going to be 10, 13, 12, 4, 1, whatever Final Fantasy game. There is no defined factor as to a favorite Final Fantasy game, because we're up to 15 for crying out loud, okay? Everyone's going to have different opinions, which... Whatever favorite is yours, please leave me, put it down in the comments below for me, because I'm kind of interested to hear how many people actually like what Final Fantasy game they prefer. Whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, or even 15. But 15 to me feels like it could have done better. It could have done better in terms of execution, it could have done better in terms of like overall performance, it could have done better in terms of story, it could have done better in terms of side quests. There was a number of stuff that they could have done better at. But they kind of failed in some small ways. Overall premise is okay, but in terms of final productivity and in terms of like satisfaction, it kind of leaves you empty. It kind of does. And even whenever I go out my way and platinum the game, I kind of feel like as if there should have been more. Like, I wouldn't even care, and I'm going to end up shooting myself in the foot, but I wouldn't even care if it demanded me to capture every fish or have every single recipe in the game. Yes, there isn't a trophy for either of those two, which is weird. I guess I could do that, but at the same time, do I have to? I think the answer is no, I don't really have to. It'd be an interesting ideal, but it's one that I'm like, I'm not really in the mood to fish all day for different fish. And really getting all the different recipes, all you gotta do is travel around long enough, buy everything that's in every single shop, store, or whatever, in terms of recipes and stuff, and eventually you'll have the entire recipe book. But it just, for the longest time, I've been trying to figure out what it is with me in Final Fantasy 15. And I think what it is that I want Final Fantasy 15 to have something that defines itself, besides the battle mechanic, because that seems to be the only thing that's had it going. You know, you have the fact that Final Fantasy X's battle mechanic was good, you have Final Fantasy 12, you have Final Fantasy 7. There's a number of games that has really good execution in terms of battle mechanics. But then you have to have a factor in of like the key aspects, the one thing that everyone liked about that game. For Final Fantasy 7, for me, it was the materia system. For Final Fantasy 10, it was a sphere grid. So, whether it was a big or small detail, it was something that defined Final Fantasy. In 15's case, it doesn't really do anything that defines it. Now, for a lot of people, some say like the open world concept was really great. Here's something interesting. Lately, I've actually been seeing and playing a lot of games that has this open world concept. You know, there's Witcher 3, there's Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, there's Fallout 4, and I'm not the best person to talk about a whole list of this stuff, but in terms of like action RPG elements, Final Fantasy 15 doesn't really do anything to break that break the gap of just generic. And Final Fantasy 15's open world concept, while it looks gorgeous, there are some things that it could have done better at, you know? I felt like for as open of a world as it is, it doesn't have a lot to explore at. You know, there are a bunch of other places that you could explore at, but there's nothing outgoing except for like, hey, here's a monster here, here's a boss, a secret boss, or not even a secret boss, it's more like a mini boss, really, is what it is. It feels like it's a mini boss. But it's like, honestly, I felt like it could have done better in terms of like hidden secrets that it could have had. But thankfully, through DLC as well as like the free updates, most of the stuff is actually getting filled in, and some of it's been really good for the most part. Now, in terms of like where this discussion is going with, there's a recent announcement that has come up, and for some players, it's discouraging for some reason. And that's the fact that, according to what Square Enix is stating, they're going to be planning on doing a Season 2 pass for Final Fantasy 15. A Season 2. In other words, we're going to have a new season for Final Fantasy 15 passes for players to interact with and everything. And this has a lot of people really irritated about it. And for good reason, too. I think, for the most part, I think players realize that 15 was never really a complete game. And to have these DLC come out of nowhere, it seems like as if they're trying to sell ourselves short. And I know for the most part, yes, there's the fact that you've got the main game, and then you have the first set of season passes. And now with this new one that's coming out and everything like that, it kind of makes you wonder, would it even be worth it? I don't think it's a matter of, is it worth it? I think it's a matter of, like, what are we going to get after we invest our money into the Series 2 of Season Pass? In the first Season Pass that we've had, we're going to be getting episode Ignis, but we have episode Prompto and episode Gladio. And within that time frame, we've had a lot of updates. Like, we've had a lot of gameplay updates in terms of, like, the quest hunts, which I wish they were permanent instead of timed. There's updated storylines and cutscenes. There's a chapter selection, which honestly has been, like, a pretty good ideal for the most part. There's been an update when it comes to Regalia, being that of a monster truck. I can't stress that enough. It's a monster truck. It may not be an actual truck, but it's a monster vehicle. And you can free roam it anywhere you want to. And I say anywhere, but it's to a certain extent. But it's pretty funny just to, like, being able to kind of, like, go around everything, go through the woods and stuff. And I even did it. No real animals was harmed during the event of what I just did. But in terms of video games, I just thought to myself, I was like, let's see how strong its durability is. So I basically took it out into the wilderness to fight a random creature. And as I was driving the vehicle, driving around the creature, every once in a while ramming into it and stuff, it turns out that it lasts longer than the actual creature itself. Now, record, that's just me going through a regular creature, not the demons themselves. So it's sort of like, this was interesting, but it's not necessarily the best. But in terms of like what they've done so far in terms of updates, they've done pretty good. I'm not going to say they've done the best, but they've done decent when it comes to updates, and so far it's slowly starting to fill in a little bit here and there. It's starting to feel like, okay, this is kind of what we kind of wanted. Mostly for like extra stuff for 15, you know? Again, not so much for the time hunts because they are timed hunts. But in terms of like a story update, chapter selections and stuff like that, that's actually really good, and that's a good detail to have in there to begin with. But for Series 2 of the Season Pass for Final Fantasy 15, it kind of makes me wonder what all will they be doing in terms of updates. So, let's not concentrate on the DLC portion themselves, because we know what the DLC is going to be. It's going to be a new episodic set. As for who, we're not sure at this moment in time, but I'm hoping one of them is going to be Agna, Insunia, and another one, and I know for some people there seems to be no reason to do it, but for me personally, I still love King Reigns. I love the guy. He is so freaking cool and awesome. I wish I had more time to admire him. I wish I had more time instead of like from like the anime series to like the movie and then a brief moment in time in the game entry itself. And then of course you have the fact there's the King's Tale. I would like to see a little interaction type thing with him in some way within the DLC. Or hell, have a story update where every once in a while not just will think back to him in terms of like what he's done for him, you know? And Record, yes, they've done that through the anime, and they've kind of done that within the movie itself. But honestly, like I said, I want more of him. He's my favorite character next to Agna, which is interesting, really. You have the father of the main character, and then you have the villain of the game itself. So it's like, that's interesting. That's weird. But to the main game itself, in terms of like updates that I would want, the biggest thing obviously being hard mode. You know, we've got easy and normal. For crying out loud already, give us a hard mode, okay? Especially since technically you've raised the level cap from where it was at level 100 to level 120. Yes, this is a thing they technically have done. They've increased the level cap on Final Fantasy 15. And I think the reason was because of the fact that you have these time trial hunts. And so it's like, okay, it makes sense for us to go ahead and increase the level cap for these players. Because technically, there is some enemies in the game, not every one of them, but there's like 2 that I remembered that is above level 100. And when I saw them, I was like, I'm sorry, what? It would be the Omega weapon that I saw firsthand. The problem was that Omega weapon didn't really look fascinating, but it definitely was threatening. It was very, very threatening. It took from until the time that I finally found it in the middle of the night until the following morning of the game's time frame, in-game time frame, not real life. I say in terms of real life, it probably took me like at least 30 to 40 minutes maybe. I'm not quite sure, but it was quite a struggle. It really was. So I imagine that was one of the reasons why they decided to increase the level cap, was because of the fact that there were stronger enemies in the game if you went out of your way to go for the hunts and stuff like that. That, and I say it was probably because of the Animaniacs. That giant thing, I guarantee it was probably because of that. But for the most part, it's not that bad. It's just a matter of like, dwindled down its HP for like a whole hour. And I have video evidence of it too. It took me a whole hour. Pretty freaking ridiculous. But I would like to see a hard mode being put into the game. Honestly, if they were to put a hard mode in Final Fantasy 15, I will more than likely be replaying it automatically with the New Game Plus stuff. You know, because the New Game Plus, you actually get to keep your level cap and everything else. So it just makes sense to go ahead and just give us a hard mode version. So that would be nice. A new optional dungeon, you know, have it secluded to where the only way you can access it is if you were like, oh, I don't know, trying to think of a way that would be good. Imagine like a way of where it's like, hey, there's a boat going to this island, and this one island is said to house a particular temple or dungeon, and you, being the main character, Noctis and friends, go into this temple. And like I said, this temple actually has multiple levels, and you go through it, and as you go deeper, you encounter like different varieties of enemies and monsters and bosses. And let's get creative. Let's introduce more different types of Final Fantasy creatures, Final Fantasy bosses, and stuff like that. And there was a bunch of good-looking ones too. As you go even further into the hunts and stuff, there were some unique enemy choices. There were some unique enemy bosses, and I'm like, I want more. This is so cool. 15 to me, in terms of art design, it was like, this is traditional Final Fantasy. The artwork, in terms of like how the character models look, the enemies and everything, they looked as if they were their original art back in the heyday of Final Fantasy, which is really redeeming and is really enjoyable, and I love that part. I guess that would be the one redeemable trait that is the best looking in terms of Final Fantasy enemies. But in terms of the overall game, it just feels empty. But again, make an optional dungeon, or hell, give us 2 or 3 optional dungeons. I'm not picky. That'd be interesting. That'd be cool. Again, I would like a little bit more variety. Give us more secrets to try to uncover. Because technically there is one other secret that I've heard about, but I haven't really gone my way to actually go into it. Now, that's not to say that it's not there, but if it is there, I might try to do it in a future video. Who knows? But we'll see how that goes. But another update that I would like to see is more chocobo racing. Or like chocobo raising or stuff like that, Considering the fact that we do ride the chocobos, we do get to customize them, we do technically get to race them, but I want more of a chocobo involvement, so to speak. Give us an opportunity to increase the ultimate weapon, or even get a better weapon that's better than the ultimate weapon. Have it to where there can be like a secret summon type thing that you can obtain. For example, if you look into the Final Fantasy franchise, there are actually a lot more different summons in the Final Fantasy franchise. You've got Hades, you've got Typhoon, you've got... There's so many different ones of them, and it's kind of hard to pick how many of them and try to put them into the main game itself. So, what I'm trying to say is that while, yes, it is discouraging to see a new set of DLC being put into motion for Final Fantasy 15, but on the other hand, I don't mind, especially since technically if the money that's going to be put for the DLC is going to be helpful in terms of like how in-depth they're going to do for free updates and stuff for 15, I honestly can't complain, because like I said, 15 deserves a chance to try to like give itself a redeemable factor. Again, like I said, just because of it being an open world game, it doesn't give us a good excuse to say, hey, this is going to be the best of the franchise. No, the open world concept isn't really that impressive for it to be a redeemable factor. And that's why I think it needs to try to improve itself in order for us to give us a little bit more variety, or even a better variety for Final Fantasy 15. But that was all I just wanted to talk about in terms of like Final Fantasy 15, especially since, like I said, Square Enix is going to be doing a new set of DLCs. And again, while most people would hate the idea of it, personally, for me, I don't think it's a bad idea. In fact, like I said, if it gives us a chance to have more stuff, and by more, I mean better choice updates for Final Fantasy 15, then like I said, I can't really complain. So, only time will tell what will happen within the future. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below of what you think about this ideal transition for a future new set of DLC for 15. And what type of free updates do you think Square Enix to try to do for 15 to begin with? Was there like an ideal concept that you thought of? Did you think there might be a new area that they could explore? Give your opinions on that one. I'm fairly interested in that ideal. And then also too, what's your favorite Final Fantasy game? You know, just out of curiosity, you know, because I know a lot of people love 7. I know a lot of people love 6. I know there's actually a good handful who like 10. Now, in terms of like 13, I think the majority of people don't care much for it. But like I said in my video, it's not bad, but it's not good either. So let's just put in that middle perspective anyway. But again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Take care, guys.